Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for day 2 of our festival. For those who are attending their first festival event, thank you. Welcome. For those who were with us last night, welcome back. It's nice to see you again. My name is Alice. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the director of this year's Postgraduate Festival at the University of Kent's Paris School of Arts and Culture. Today, we are having a conversation with Scout Gibbons Roll, an artist based in Baltimore, USA, who I'm honored to call my oldest friend. The festival theme this year is escapism. The global pandemic has shattered life as we knew it. Through this destruction, the importance of our artistic values has been made clear. Art allows us to escape the repetition of the everyday. Art allows us to inhabit the spaces and bodies that reach beyond our wildest dreams. Art is a tool we can use to construct a new reality. By dedicating a week to artistic endeavors centered around escapism, we invite you to consider the role art plays in your conception of the world. It is time for us to join together as a community and rebuild our world, one that is no longer confined to a physical space. In fact, many of our panelists and guests are joining us from different parts of the world. Before we get started, I'll go over a few housekeeping items. This event will be recorded and a link to rewatch this will be made available in the days to come. There will be time for questions and answers at the end. If you have any questions for our lovely panelists, please send them in using the Q&A function. Thank you again for joining us. We are so thrilled to have you here and I hope to see you at more of our events. You can visit us online at kentparisfestival.com for more information and registration. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Hannah.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you for the introduction. And thank you everyone for joining our event today, and especially a big thank you for Scout for accepting our invitation to be a guest speaker for our art event. So for the beginning, I would like to introduce Scout, and they are American artists based in Baltimore in Maryland. Scout graduated at George Washington University at Schools of Arts and Design in 2016 and then opened a studio practice, which is named Repeopled. Scout is an illustrator and painter working with the cryptocurrency and NFTs, and in all that in order to create a unique value and identity of their work. So as Alice already mentioned, art can be understood in so many different ways, and it's a form of expression, it's a form of communication, and it's also a form of escapism. And I would like to ask you, Scout, if you can introduce yourself and if you can introduce your art and tell us a little bit more about your own way of escaping and how do you resonate with the idea of escaping through the art. And also before that, we will launch 2 polls to ask our audience. First question, what is your favorite way of escaping? And other is, what is the favorite way of escaping online? And thank you, Scout.
Hi, my name is Scout Gibbons Roll. I am an artist from Baltimore, Maryland. I was born and raised here, educated here, and then left for DC when I was in the lucky years of the Obama administration. We're going to start off with this image of my eye. Is the screen sharing working all right? Okay, great. The eye you see here is my calling card. I have strabismus, which is a weakness of one eye. It's the same eye disorder that other artists have shared, such as Da Vinci and Rembrandt. It allows me to see the world in a unique line-based way and is a gift. So this eye that you see here is a charcoal drawing that I did of my lazy eye to honor my view of the world. I leave stickers around. I do technically participate in graffiti, and I am pro sticker graffiti all the way. I'm a 3rd generation artist. My dad and grandfather, his father, both commercial artists, very successful. My grandmother on my maternal side and my mother as well both studied art and participated in the Baltimore art scene. However, because they were women, they were not encouraged or given the same resources as my male family members to pursue art. So when I make today, I am honoring their legacy as much as I can in my ability to be an artist. While I do present as fairly femme, my pronouns are they, them, and I identify as non-binary. This is one of my many disguises. So I also have obsessive compulsive disorder, and art is my escape from that. It has been a way of coping throughout my life. It's very helpful, and it has allowed me to balance my mind. I have found that in doing digital art, my digital art is like a good vacation, in that I am missing physical art when I'm making digital art. And so when you go to the beach, it's a good beach trip because you know that at the end of it, you miss your home and you want to go back. And so that's sort of where I'd like to start off on. And actually, I should say I do portraiture in my spare time. So this is my mom over here on the left. This is a recent work that I did in participation with the Station North Arts District. My mom worked at the art supply store that facilitated the supply chain for the artists that now make up where I live and practice, which is the Station North Arts District. She's cool. These are some portraits that I've done. On the left is a commission. On the right is my very good friend Kit. You can see the different styles of realism. I also spend a great deal of time working on landscapes from life, working in plein air. I have sketchbooks going back to 2009 and was very lucky. The high school that I went to enforced using sketchbooks as a way of developing a practice. And so I do that a lot as well. I also do a lot of figure drawing. On the left is a painting of my grandparents. And on the right is a sketch of my former neighbor. And I used some flowers to smudge for ink there on the side. And so these are just some examples of figurative work that's realist, a little bit impressionistic, but is based in observation, firmly in observation. And then I think Hannah, I'm going to go for the next question here, if that's okay. Escapism can be a way of moving past anxiety and stress and the realities of daily life. But my art and our use of art as a society can help us to not feel stuck in the day-to-day. I learned this from my mom. On the left, we have a doodle that I scanned when my mom was very anxious. Growing up, I would watch her take a phone call and she would grab a napkin and she would doodle flowers and hearts. And I watched that growing up and I think it just kind of stuck because now when I'm anxious or stressed and I have a piece of paper or a napkin in front of me, I also doodle flowers. And so this is the continuing line that I have between my digital and physical art, is the root of my mom, and the root of wanting to escape. It comes out in different ways, but it's always there.
Scott, I'm curious, do you approach digital art and physical art differently, or is your those?
Yes. So I grew up, as I said, my dad and grandfather were both in the graphic arts. My dad was the art director for a news channel when I was younger. He used to take me to work a lot, and I was able to learn how to use a Wacom tablet or Wacom tablet when I was about 4 years old. So I've always been very proficient in digital art just because I grew up around it. It wasn't until I got my iPad and my Apple Pencil that I started to work enjoying digital art. After college, I did an internship at an ad agency in Chicago. I didn't really like it that much, and I couldn't see myself having a career as a graphic designer because I hadn't yet found digital art to be interesting or peaceful. But the iPad has, and Procreate is the app that I use, has become an escape from my physical studio practice. And the mobility of having a tablet to draw with is just invaluable and incredible. And then it also helps that it has decentralized my practice, as well as the art world in general is just becoming more and more decentralized, which is a good thing in that, you know, I'm very pro decentralization, but the cost of entry right now for that is very high. And we haven't gotten to the point where this technology is particularly egalitarian or accessible. So I think that as technology evolves, we will, as artists, have more equitable access to technology in regards to art. But it comforts me to know that if, you know, I lost power and I didn't have internet and I couldn't go to the art supply store, I could take a piece of wood and like burn the tip of it and make a charcoal drawing. And so appreciating the differences is definitely has affected my practice in a very positive way.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Also, with the digital art, I'm thinking that it also offers a certain escape from a traditional art market. So I've been curious about that. There is a price of like online exhibitions and online galleries. What is your opinion about it? And also, do you have any kind of experience about it? And do you think it offers more opportunities to artists, or does it limit the artists in certain ways?
So I think to begin with, I spend a lot of time on Contemporary Art Daily. It is a great website if you are trying to figure out what's going on out there. I love that. That was my first, well, actually, Instagram, I would say, is my first experience with a gallery-like digital platform. I do think that at some point Instagram is going to replace galleries, and I do like that. I mean, I appreciate the work that gallerists do. That's not to discredit them. They are very integral to the art world, and we couldn't live without them. But, you know, it's really hard to get people to look at your work. And it's really hard to get people to take you seriously. It's kind of it's a catch-22. And so when you, and I, in my spare time, have worked in politics, in Baltimore, progressive politics. And it's very much the same of you want to build coalitions, you want to build relationships, you want to build social capital. And I think that as the art world moves and adapts to being online, it will have a very similar effect of making things equal for artists. But then, there's also you have to know how to photograph your work. So there's and you have to have a setup for photographing your work. And you might not have access to internet, or you might not have access to just the aesthetic language that we use in the art world. So I think that there's a lot of catching up to do, but the digital galleries are in the right place. And we just need to keep moving forward. And at some point, things will level out and become much more equitable, I hope.
I think part of this kind of gets into the NFT realm. I've noticed since the pandemic started, you've been creating NFTs, and I believe this image of the flowers on the right is an NFT.
Yes, correct. So we will switch over to these slides. So the NFTs, I didn't expect myself to start doing NFTs at all. And I would not really classify myself as a digital artist initially. What happened was I was making a lot of these illustrations on my iPad, like the flowers, and I didn't know where to put them. And my fiance has been doing more and more research into cryptocurrency and just that emerging market. And so he helped me participate by removing the barriers for entry and helping me post these as NFTs. So NFTs, for those who are not familiar, are NFT stands for non-fungible token. It is a way of selling and sending secure works of art. So it uses blockchain technology, much like cryptocurrencies, to make the transaction secure and unhackable. And because it's an emerging marketplace, there's a lot of fluctuation. I have not sold one NFT yet. But for me, the most important part is learning about emerging technology as it comes out, so that I can stay abreast of changes in the art world. And this is an attitude that I developed at the college that I went to, which was the Corcoran. It was a museum school that got bought out by George Washington University. And we had a really good education program, but I decided to switch. When we got bought, I decided to switch programs so that I would only have to do 4 years instead of 5 years, because I was doing a master's in art education and a bachelor's in fine arts. And I knew that I wanted to be an artist and not a teacher. I had thought that maybe I would want to be a middle school art teacher. It turns out I do not have the patience for that, but bless those who do. And I realized that if I wanted to be a really good artist, that I would have to learn about art history and learn about the conversation that I was entering into, because that's important. You have to come correct. And in studying art history, I learned that the artists who adapt to emerging technology tend to be fairly successful, and developing longevity in your practice is probably the hardest thing. And every artist talk that I've ever listened to, that has been the main source of that's where I've gotten advice about how to maintain a studio practice. And so it's looking for new ways of selling, new ways of buying, new ways of interacting. And so that's how I got involved in this. But we'll skip ahead to these slides so that I can answer the other part of your question, which is what these works are, which I think Hannah, actually I should real quick, these are some portraits to answer the previous question. Here are some realist portraits. This is Jill Carter. She's a politician in Baltimore. This is Bill Henry. He is the comptroller in Baltimore City currently. I was lucky enough to be included in junior high LA's isolation issue about this time last year. I had done a series of portraits of Baltimore politicians in progressive politics, and they accepted them. So this was actually my second experience with a digital gallery, because we were at the beginning of the pandemic, and everyone had just found out that they couldn't produce what they thought they were going to be able to produce. And so that's how that ended up happening. And so these are some realist portraitures. And then I think I will go ahead and explain the different identities of my NFTs, if that's a good idea.
Yeah, that would be great, because Scout has like different Instagram accounts. Maybe we can share the links as well in the chat so everyone can visit and see the different artistic production of Scouts. So we can call it like because you create physical and also digital art, and you use different skills and different styles. So I assume you had to create like different forms of identities of your artistic creation. So it would be really great to hear more about it.
So over here on the left, we have a drawing that I did when I was probably 6 or 7. 6, let's go for 6. It says cool. It says cool because at the time I thought rainbows were really cool. And they made me happy. And so this is a really early example of escapism in my art. On the right, we have a painting, a self-portrait that I've slowly been adding to since 2018, of me in my school uniform at the Immaculate Conception School, which was a Catholic school I attended for a few years. And I'm about 10 in this painting. And the snakes are representative of the issues within the Catholic Church. We have a lot of stuff. There's a lot there. I'm just not even going to go into it, but there's a lot. So, and I put these together to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about when I say that I'm interacting with my inner child. So here we have another thing that I thought was cool, bugs and turtles, both very cool things. And then we have on the right a later illustration, more recent illustration of bugs. Still think they're cool. And then finally we have in May 10th of 2000, we've got an illustration that I did of my garden. Not spelling so well yet, but still there. And we have a more recent illustration that is an NFT of a self-portrait of me in an imaginary garden, because right now my garden is a porch and not a piece of land. That I guess will come later in my life. So here we have some more flowers. Here's a example on the left of an NFT versus a physical drawing of flowers that I scanned in. And so I guess, so we're gonna go back a minute. So I put these in here to explain my 3 NFT accounts, or my 3 social media accounts that correspond to different NFTs that I have. So basically, in the world of advertising, I learned that you want to do things in threes. And just in marketing in general, people like things in threes. So when I was tossing around ideas as to what I wanted to do with the whole NFT thing, I was like, okay, whatever I do, I need to have 3 different things because it will help me organize myself, and it will help other people not be so overwhelmed by all of the things that I'm making. Again, with the obsessive compulsive disorder, organization of thoughts is very key to my practice. I have 3 accounts, Instagram accounts that are linked to, and there's a rewind. When you're selling NFTs, there is a digital marketplace that is called OpenSea. And so when you want to sell an NFT, you upload it to this marketplace. And I don't fully understand the way it works. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but it's secure. It's secure, and you can understand who's looking at it. You can see who's looking at it. You can see who's interested in it. It has a social media aspect to it. But, again, this is an emerging marketplace. So there are lots of different people using it. There's lots of different art. There's, deviant art type stuff, anime, all the way to fine art. And so I saw I didn't really see much work that looked like my work. And so I decided to do 4 marketplaces within this one larger marketplace. So I have my Repeopled, which is my painting studio practice, where I can sell the NFT, the digital file of the painting, without having to sell the physical painting. And the other nice thing about selling works this way is that you can write into the code that you as an artist retain, say, 10% of all former profits. So for example, right now in the art world, you have people making work that sells for a low price that seems high to them at the time, but in comparison later ends up being low because it goes to auction, 10 years later at Sotheby's or Christie's, and they make a huge profit off of it. And so the idea is that by coding profit sharing into this way of selling digital art, artists can retain profits long-term when works are sold. I don't know how that's going to work out, just because that does go against the very nature of the way the art world works currently. But it's definitely, we can try to fix that. And I guess that's where artists are the most helpful, is thinking outside the box. But so anyways, I was working on making these accounts, and I was thinking, what's going to make me happy? Because I don't want to stress myself out with making digital art. I had already done that. I had mentioned I had worked in politics. Specifically, I did graphic design and mail design. So if you happen to live in Baltimore and are watching this, and you are a registered Democrat, you probably got some mail that I designed, and then maybe put it up on your fridge or threw it out. And that is, it was really fun, and it was a really good learning experience for me, but it was not fulfilling. And it's completely different than, I did not even include it in this presentation because it's like the same. You've seen it, you've all seen that kind of design. So hence the need for escape, doing political graphic design work is really stressful. But so the three, back to the initial question, the 3 accounts that I've been working with that I have corresponding Instagram accounts to are Uda Scout, which references the Champs-Élysées and Vogue illustrations, but then also has a satirical tone to it. So here's an example of a Uda Scout piece, Uda de Prudentia. This is completely made up. We looked up some, I had my fiance help me look up some cool Latin words to put in. And so this is, when I worked at the agency and as I've done these jobs doing commercial art, I've learned a lot of commercial art properties that I can't really apply or don't want to apply to my painting, but that I like using because it's fun. It's a visual language. On the left, I've included a photograph of a lemonade sign that I did when I worked as a sign artist at Trader Joe's. I don't think they have those in France, but Trader Joe's is an American grocery store that is very hippie themed. And every single store has a team of sign artists who create all of the signs for the entire store by hand. So they don't hire graphic designers. They just hire sign artists. And so I was able to learn this fairly old art of sign art that we don't really use anymore. It used to be a huge industry, and now that we have printers and computers, we don't need it. And so I feel very, very fortunate that I was able to learn these things because there's an art to lettering. So anyways, I didn't really I wanted to make the most of that. And I do miss making signs. It's a very meditative activity. I find that I am very calm when I'm writing, just physically writing. And so when I was using my iPad and I was doodling flowers, eventually that sort of morphed into doodling words. And then I thought about Elon Musk, and I think that was where it started. So yeah, so I don't have the Elon Musk one, but we do have Bezos by Jeff, which is a reference to the Amazon Queen, Mr. Jeff Bezos. We also have, and that's a drawing that I did that I scanned in and then digitally edited before I decided to just do them as illustrations on my iPad. So on the left, you have Like and Follow Correcting Powder. And that is just a spoof, a parody of the beauty industry and the beauty industry in regards to Instagram. So Uda Scout is a way of including politics and sign art and my frustration with politics as well into something that I can do that makes me happy. On the left here again is, I did this during the Trump administration. We were dealing with a lot of saving of face. And so I wanted to comment on that, and I made this drawing. And then later, again, they morphed into these. So we have On Point acne patches, which I don't know about you guys, but acne patches are the best, especially with maskne. Maskne is horrible, and you can't see it on me, but it's here. So we have these. I took the little claw thing from I forget, is that the flag or money or some American thing that I took that from. I'm not being a good American right now, but that's a joke about American politics. So yeah, so that's U to Scout, number one. Number two, we're gonna do Fleur de Scout. So this is back to flowers. What do I find relaxing, and how can I make that a thing that I do for a while? How can I draw that out? How can I make it interesting? How can I keep it interesting? And so color is something that I've been using for that. It's allowed me to explore color. It's allowed me to explore pattern. And it's allowed me to make these drawings of things that I otherwise would not make, that do make me happy. But if I made that and only that, I wouldn't take myself seriously as an artist, which is a whole nother thing that I won't get into because we only have an hour. We have Fleur de Scout. Flowers. I was already drawing a lot of flowers in my sketchbook, and enjoying painting flowers. Here's some oil paintings of my mother's backyard. And on the left, you can see there's a basketball hoop up here. That was something that I had tried to do as a child and it didn't work out. And art has become my sport at this point. And so we have another flower here. And so these are really just simply happy flowers. They are just meditative. And I love it. And you can add anything to flowers and it's great. You can add cats, you can add bugs, you can add birds. That just is, no matter what, flowers make it happy most of the time. And so more flowers. Here's another example of a physical illustration of flowers that I did. This is on watercolor paper. And then, or excuse me, on the right. And then on the left, we have another NFT flower that I started doing. And so that's Fleur de Scout, another reference to French culture, because French culture is the best culture, in my opinion. So now we have the third NFT account / social media account, which is Scout the Younger. That is a direct reference to the fact that I'm a third generation artist. In the days before, when we had, Rembrandt, etc., the old masters would have people come in and they do basically, I'm forgetting the word for it right now, but internships. You would learn the master's techniques, and if you were lucky, you got to include that in your name. And so I'm very aware of being a younger artist in the context of my family. And I said as a joke one day that I was Scout the Younger, and it just kind of stuck. So Scout the Younger is where I take images of nature, illustrations of people, things that don't fall into the other categories that I talked about, because I like drawing abstract versions of things that I see in real life or things that I remember. Sometimes I draw out my dreams, and it's just a really good way of transferring what I've learned from doing plein air painting and op-ed illustration into illustrations that are very line-based and allow me to also experiment with color. And then when I learn things about color while I'm making these, and then I can take that information back when I'm doing another painting. And so it's a really nice feedback loop that I get. And I think that ties back into what we had when we had people apprenticing. That's the word. It's not an internship, it's an apprenticeship. It's the same thing, I guess. But when you had people apprenticing, like you're learning, and you're in a safe learning environment. And, you know, when you get out of art school, Carrie James Marshall is my favorite artist, hands down. He's just the best. And he says that when you get out of art school, it's kind of like you're coming down from a really long high, and you aren't in that hazy den of critique and interest anymore. You're in the cold real world where, you know, it takes a lot for somebody to notice your work. And so and that's sort of, I look to him for how to keep my practice sustainable. And I credit him as well for, he does a comic book, and it helps him with his paintings. And so I think in making these NFTs, and making these digital illustrations, I've found something else that can balance out my painting practice. And I would be remiss if I did not credit him with helping me to figure out that way around things. So if you are just hearing about him, his name is Kerry, Kerry, James Marshall, Marshall. And he's fantastic. Yeah, I hope one day he sees this. So those are my three accounts, my three names that I've chosen to sort of organize what I'm making as I make it. And, you know, if I sell some, great, that's awesome. If I don't sell any, I can, you know, make a book of these illustrations. I can do it, like, the world is my oyster. I can use them for whatever I want. The important thing is that I've made a process that can keep me making even when I am feeling sad, and keep me motivated. And I think that I am that way because of how I deal with my obsessive compulsive disorder, of just redirecting my thoughts, consciously redirecting my thoughts to cope with everyday life. And so I think you can see that in this work as well. I'll go back through a couple of them just to be more direct. So I would say this is Scout the Younger. This is what I'm referencing. This is the age. This is where this is the point at which I think I know what's cool, and I do know it's cool. And it's like right before you get into high school, and you change and adjust yourself in ways that, you know, aren't real, and to fit in. And so this is the golden days, Scout the Younger. And then we have Fleur de Scout, bugs, flowers, more bugs, birds, turtles, or excuse me. And then we have, this is also Fleur de Scout. And then we have Eau de Scout, Fleur de Scout, Eau de Scout, Eau de Scout, Scout the Younger. And this is also Fleur de Scout. This is my cat. But it actually ended up looking a lot more like my neighbor's cat. So this cat is named Warren. And yeah, so I end up making a lot more flower drawings than I do anything else. And I think that just speaks to the meditative quality of interacting with nature. But I'm really glad that I have these outlets to express myself in other ways. I'm very fortunate.
Have you found that people engage with the different accounts in a different way? Or also thinking about just like the general online art community?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely fickle, and it has a lot to do with manipulating an algorithm, and the algorithm's always changing. So that's really difficult. So I find that like the most, I hate to use the word authentic, but the most authentic pieces are the ones that get the most engagement. I've started using hashtag, and also that authenticity is like, I don't know where it comes from or how it happens, it just does. And I guess that's authenticity, but I've also been using a hashtag generator, which anybody who is an artist using social media, I mean, anyone using social media, hashtags can be, they're like very useful if you harness them correctly, but they can get out of control. And so that's a process that I'm still learning about. I'm really lucky that I worked in social media just as a part-time job. I did social media for a restaurant. I've done like food photography in that way. And I've had experience running politicians' social media accounts. And so some of that stuff translates to being an artist and having an artist account, but it's definitely like an emotional connection that somebody sees something and it catches their eye. And I think that's what I'm looking for. I can't really put it into words. And so I'm lucky when I find it. It feels like I found gold. And I mean, that's back to my eye in the beginning. But yeah, my hashtag game needs to be worked on a little bit. And people are really nice. But the real stuff is like when you see a younger artist who's just starting to make work, and when they find your account and they like your stuff or they leave a comment, that's to me the most fulfilling thing, because that's how I started in high school figuring out what I wanted to do, was on the internet. And I think that's, a generational thing and will change and adapt. But I definitely like the ability to connect with people via the internet. The internet.
Yes, thank you, Scout. I think we've got like last 10 minutes, so we can have a look in the question from the audience. So first question is coming back to NFTs. So what are some barriers to entering the NFT market?
Firstly, and most importantly, financial. There's a huge financial barrier to entering the NFT market. And that is something that I don't see it being discussed as much in articles that talk about, whether or not NFTs are going to be around for a long time, if people are going to switch to NFTs. And I think as a kid, my mom also worked for Hewlett Packard HP. And so she was a sales rep. So she'd bring home, digital cameras, like the first HP digital cameras. And then we got Palm Pilots. And I remember my mom saying something about Palm Pilots being, at some point they're going to put a phone in here. And then we did put phones in Palm Pilots, and now we have that. And so that growing up around emerging technology has made me aware of the possibilities of technology. So while NFTs are inherently very inequitable, they have the potential long-term, if we do a good job adapting this technology, to change the way artists get paid, the way artists get credited, and how we work. Could you repeat the question one more time? I want to make sure I answered all of it.
Yes, sure. So the question was, what are some barriers to entering the NFT market?
Yeah, definitely 100% financial. You have to have a chunk of money to put into making these accounts, having the time to figure out how to make the accounts. I could not have done it without my fiance. And he spends a lot of time on the internet reading about this stuff. So time and money, which in today's world, being capitalism, we just don't have. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's great, but it needs to change.
And another question is, do you have a preference or a favorite of the type of work you do?
Well, I think something that I figured out while preparing for this talk, because this is also my first artist talk, so thank you all for bearing with me. Audience, you're awesome. I feel like digital art is a vacation from my real life of physical art. The reason that I think that is because my mom, like I had said in the beginning, ran part of an art supply store that was an artist and draftsman store. And so I grew up like when I was born in 94. So sort of, and that was when things were changing technology wise. We were going away from advertising art as making physical things to digital production. And so like, I don't think that we millennials have like a clue as to how much time and labor and materials were put into, I mean, just making a flyer, like in design as a program, and Photoshop like replaced so much complicated, expensive technology that took up like physical space. And so like you can have a whole design studio on a computer, and that's something that I don't hear talked about as much. And so that affects the way that I, growing up around that conversation has affected the way, what I like to do. And then also my dad, like my parents are divorced, and I spent the weekends with my dad. And a lot of times we would just be in his office and I'd just see him sit there making commercial art, and it was so depressing. Like it was just a dark room with a computer, and then like video would have to be rendered, and that was when we'd go out for lunch because rendering took like an hour. So I saw that as depressing, and I didn't want to get into it. And so at this point in my career, or in my practice, I feel like I am starting to fall in love again with what digital art can do and embracing it for my own practice. But I think because I have that like history of toxicity with digital art, physical art will always be my home and close to my heart. And so, that's sort of where I came up with the idea that digital art is like a good vacation. You don't have to get messes on your clothes. You can use whatever color you want. You don't have to mix it. You can use whatever nib you want, and you don't have to worry about buying it. It just comes on the app. There's the mess, the materials, and you can sometimes I'll find myself hitting the backspace on my sketchbook, because I have now like my brain sees them as very similar. And so I'm getting used to it. But yeah, but a good vacation, you want to come home at the end of it. You miss your home and you want to go back. And I think that's at this point right now, that's where I am. And the romantic in me will always love creating physical art more than digital. But it's, they're both important. It's important to have a balance.
I love that analogy of the good vacation. We have time for one more question from the audience. This one comes from Callum. He wants to know, does your OCD ever affect your methods of creating art?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, 100%. And my iPad has helped with that, because I used to be reticent to work with color and experiment with color. And once I figured out that I could just do whatever I wanted with color on my iPad and I didn't have to like work to mix the colors, it allowed me to let go of that sense of constant perfectionism that's in my head. And that's like great. That's really good. That's very helpful. But then also with OCD, sometimes you have to like let out all of that anxiety, and you can't like I'm very lucky in that from a very, very young age, like 3 years old, my mom would just give me my crayons and my paper, and I would go scribble all of my stress out. Like I'd go to my dad's for the weekend and it would be very tense, and I'd just come home and just on the paper. So I learned art as therapy, as one of my like initial skills as a person. And looking back at my life, if I didn't have that, I would be a completely different person, because at every stressful point in my life where my OCD has become overwhelming, I just do what my mother taught me. I do that, the physical act of making, and the physical act of making allows my brain to take a breath, and allows me to redirect my thoughts. So I'm lucky in that, like, I know I've heard other artists with OCD, like they make hyper realistic graphite drawings, for example, or they can't show something unless it's perfect. And fortunately, my OCD doesn't come out in my art in that way. But I'm really lucky, like really, really lucky. And I credit my mom for that. Way to go, Martha. So yeah, if you have OCD, there is hope.
I love that. And yeah, let's give it up for Martha, because I remember being a kid going over to your house and there would just be art everywhere, and you two would be working on pieces of art. So it's so lovely that you are keeping that legacy of hers alive. And you carry that with your work. Yeah. Thank you so much for letting us host your first artist talk. This was so lovely. And thank you everybody who has joined us. Again, this has been recorded, and the link to rewatch it will be made available in the days to come. And join us for more events. You can find out more at kentparisfestival.com. So thanks. Bye, everybody. Au revoir, adieu.